Well, hello and welcome everybody to our year end, or I guess it's next year predictions, but we always do them at the year end. This is something Helen and I have done for many years and always look forward to doing it. I think I probably know most of you on this webinar, but I'm Michele Shuster. I'm one of the partners, managing partner at Murray and Shuster, and this is my longtime partner and colleague for, gosh, going on 25 years now.
Yes, correct.
Which is insane since we're only 29, right?
But
it is a time warp. So we're pleased to do it again this year. And with that, do you want to start with our housekeeping?
I do. We are recording this session and it'll be available on our website next week. If you want to share it around, we would love that. We are taking live questions. Submit them via the Q&A chat that you'll see on your screen, like we see on ours. And we will go through those as they pop up or as they become relevant to our content and respond to you. And a couple of disclaimers, because we are lawyers after all. We are not providing legal advice. For those of you that have AI note takers, before we dive in, I wanted to share a quick note about them. We know that they are very common and they can be convenient, but we want to be upfront. We do not recommend relying on them for this webinar. The legal interpretations that they give sometimes just aren't right, and they come out of context. And you always need to remember that if you're using them in a conversation with your own lawyer, it could actually ruin the attorney-client privilege. That's not the case here because we're not acting as attorneys, but just so you should know. We want to make sure that you're working with the most accurate information possible. So to avoid any possible misunderstandings or misapplications of our content, we encourage you to take your own notes. Of course, if you have any questions or clarifications you need afterwards, we're more than happy to have you follow up with us, and we'll be able to talk with you personally about it so to make sure that you understand it and you receive accurate information. And that's the end of my housekeeping.
That is a great disclosure. That's the first time I've heard us get that one. I might have to borrow that for future reference for our webinars. Really important reminders, and it's amazing how often AI gets it wrong. But I think that's a great topic for us to start out with as far as predictions go. We know that Time Magazine has made the architects of AI the persons of the year for 2026. And I think that it is no surprise to anybody that we think AI will influence a lot of what goes on next year, both in how companies are operating, but also in the regulations that we are sure to see on the state and federal level. Well, maybe not so much on the state level anymore, which brings us to our first topic of what the feds are going to be doing next year. And I think we got a pretty good idea of that based on what President Trump released earlier this week.
Right. We've been rumored that there was going to be an executive order from President Trump on AI, and sure enough, it has come out. And for those who like the idea of having one standard, a federal standard, and nothing else, then this is your Christmas and holiday present, because President Trump's executive order indicates that basically he is prohibiting all state legislation and laws with regards to AI. Now, as soon as I read that sentence, I said to myself, he can't do that. Okay. But then if you read deeper, you'll see what the complete plan is, and it's pretty comprehensive. And it specifically applies to the Federal Trade Commission and the FCC with regards to duties that he is assigning to them within the next 90 days. So we're talking about things that are going to happen very quickly. And one thing that is set law is that when federal law chooses to preempt state laws, and it's in the statute, then it does preempt it. And so one of the things that Trump has the agencies doing is going through all of their regulations and laws and identifying which of them preempt all of the state AI laws that are out there already. So, for example, the FTC Act prohibits unfair and deceptive conduct, the UDAP types of things. If there's a law out there that says, AI is a UDAP violation, they are now looking at that and saying, well, the FTC Act would preempt then that state law. But if you think about it, that happens with all other types of consumer protection topics all the time. And it's very rare when you actually have a specific preemption, right?
Yeah.
I think we've had a couple that COPPA, I think, has a preemption.
Can't spam. We'll be talking about that a little bit.
Yeah. And then that's one of the buckets. They're going to try to have these laws struck down as being preempted by federal law. And then Department of Justice has been mandated to go out and identify all the state laws that are out there and to bring lawsuits having them declared unconstitutional. Now, this is on a different grounds. This is going to be based on interstate commerce because the feds have the control over interstate commerce. That's why we have an FAA, for example, over the airplanes. And there's no, in fact, there's a U.S. Supreme Court case that says all those state consumer laws do not apply to anything to do with consumers on airlines. And so they're kind of going to go out there and see if they can have these all declared, state laws declared unconstitutional.
Which brings me to my first prediction.
Okay.
I think the state AGs will probably not stand by and just let this happen. It'll probably happen down party lines. I think we'll see some state AGs that push this back.
So
this will be our first one where we differ on.
Okay, well, only because I have information that you don't have.
Oh,
because the state AGs,
love that.
36 state attorneys general sent a letter to Congress saying you can't do that. Okay, and there was about 10 Republicans, including our own Ohio Dave Yost, of course, who's term limited and isn't running for re-election. And so they have already made that first step. I'll tell you that it wasn't what the world's. It was only a 2-page letter. It wasn't really the world's most persuasive thing I've ever read. I think they were just so shocked. They just wanted to get their objection out there. But the tail end of Trump's plan is to pass a federal AI law next year. And unfortunately, with the dysfunction of Congress, I don't know that I will predict that won't happen next year. Okay. I think we're all gonna, what do we call it, Michele, when we were discussing what it's gonna be like, trying to figure out whether these state laws apply or not? Chaos. I predict chaos. Okay. And the only people that are going to benefit are going to be us, the lawyers. Okay.
You're probably right.
Sadly, yeah. It is. It's going to put all of those state AI laws in question, especially if there are pending lawsuits. You're going to have judges that might choose to stay the state AI law. But some states, but then in other courts might not stay it, kind of like we've had with the some of the FTC rules where they, it's just chaos. So I think it's going to actually make the states dig in harder and push it harder and get them passed and kind of put it in his space, especially the blue states. And they raise a good point too, because it's a heck of a lot easier. I've done lobbying for decades. Heck of a lot easier to get something passed in the state legislature than lately, certainly. And lately goes the last 10 years in our Congress. And sometimes we just have Congresses that aren't, that they don't work well together. Sometimes they're better than others. And it's nice to have at least one avenue to address something that maybe is particularly problematic. I know I was reading recently some of the issues that had popped up with regards to again, the attorneys general wrote a letter on the AI in these programs, and I watched on the Today Show this week how they just instructed this little boy who had a fluffy toy who had an AI voice on how to find the matches in the house and how to light them and how where to look for all the matches and how to light the best fire, and and there's some awful other very violent ones, very sexually oriented things that are out there that really do need to be addressed. And so we'll have to see whether or not they're going to let those types of legislation go through. But certainly in terms of the folks on this call with regards to disclosures and the other things that AI is requiring, that's going to, you're going to continue to have to watch for that and be aware of it. We'll be letting folks know through our newsletters and updates when these things come up, and this is effective, this is not effective, now it wasn't effective and now it is effective, and we'll try to keep as much of that out there next year, trying to give you at least one place you can come for peace and calm.
And meanwhile, we have these state laws that were passed this year that go into effect next year, and so it really puts people in a quandary as to what they do. I think in the short term, the smartest route is obviously to pay attention to what those state regulations are that passed and what the requirements are. Several of them require you to provide disclosures as to how information is being collected and how it's used in the AI algorithms. Obviously, from the standpoint of placing telephone calls using AI, which is an artificial voice, the TCPA very clearly requires prior express written consent for telephone calls that are initiated using a pre-recorded or artificial voice. That's going to stay in effect. I don't anticipate any of that changing. So, while all of this is going on and while we're thinking about what we have to do to keep up with our marketing compliance requirements, those are certainly things that need to be there. Privacy is evolving at such a rapid pace, and I know that Aaron Perry is providing a webinar on privacy that's coming up for the next year. And it is changing so quickly. It's something we see every month where bills are being introduced, and we're seeing states that are passing that. So it's something we really need to stay on top of. What's also interesting is I've been watching the legislative monitoring on that state front. I think more probably by a factor of about 10, we see more AI bills being introduced on the state level than anywhere, which I'm sure is one of the reasons that prompted President Trump and the feds to kind of step in and say, hey, we have to kind of pay attention here so that we make this AI compliance or regulatory requirement framework something that businesses can actually comply with. So it'll be very interesting to see. You can be guaranteed, and Helen and I are both going to agree on this, you're going to see lots of updates from us next year in the artificial intelligence world. And it's exciting stuff. Everybody's using it. It's making folks much more efficient. It's funny how often now I receive from clients an AI response to the legal question, and I'm asked, do I agree? So, rarely do I completely agree with the things that are coming through. So for sure, artificial intelligence, it's not any kind of shocking prediction that is going to be one of the main focuses on the compliance front heading into next year. Something that is not quite as exciting, but something that's just top of mind because of some of the actions lately is that anybody that's a voice service provider or a telecom carrier, either originating, terminating, or an intermediate provider, they have robocall mitigation database filing obligations, and those started over a year ago. And what we have seen the FCC do recently is to really monitor those filings and read those filings and make sure that companies that are filing their robocall mitigation plans in the robocall mitigation database are providing all of the necessary components to a robocall mitigation plan. So, specifically what their role is in the call path, what type of robocall mitigation measures they're taking. Are they using any third-party analytics companies to assist with that? And what stops do they have in place to make sure that they're not carrying illegal robocalls? And, we know that the biggest threat with anybody that has a filing in the robocall mitigation database is that the FCC would remove a filing because it's deficient. And once your robocall mitigation plan is removed from the database, then all carriers are required to stop carrying your traffic, which means if you're a company that primarily originates phone calls, or that's an active part of your business, which I know is for a lot of people on this, it shuts you down completely. So definitely worth something to pay attention to. And most importantly, to just go back and look at and make sure that as the FCC has issued more orders, you have updated that robocall mitigation plan. Obviously, that's something we're happy to help you with, but that's something that you really just can't afford to get wrong. But I definitely anticipate that the FCC will have more announcements and more enforcement actions, removals from that database into 2026. What about you? What do you got next?
I'm going to talk about the Federal Trade Commission. Okay. Kind of did a deep dive into what happened with the Federal Trade Commission this year, because that's kind of the way I look at it and analyze it in terms of what we expect to see next year. And then a lot of really interesting things, starting out with the personnel issues. We ended up with losing on all the Democratic commissioners, and I haven't seen any rush to appoint any new Democratic commissioners. That issue is still pending in the U.S. Supreme Court. The FTC Act specifically requires that the commissioners can only be fired for cause, and President fired the Democrats, admittedly not with cause, and believes and argued that the court that it's an outdated way of having independent agencies, and that in today's day and world that doesn't make sense. It's kind of interesting because it's specific statutory language, which generally, we always hear the different parties complain about judges being activists, right? Mm-hmm. And so we've got specific statutory language, and then we've got the administration asking the Supreme Court to consider ignoring it, which from their questions they might, and when really the general way of getting that fixed is by getting legislation that revises it. But as we've already mentioned, that we have a dysfunctional Congress, so that's not the option. So a lot's resting on that, quite frankly. It will change the entire framework of the administrative agencies that are out there. And it's kind of funny because I don't think that anyone would mind from the administration getting rid of any of them except the Federal Reserve, which kind of runs our whole money world, you know? So you gotta watch, you can't throw out the baby with the bathwater on this one. So, but I don't think that regardless, it's going to leave them with a Republican majority, even if they do come back. And so I think you're going to, still see more of what you have been seeing. In looking at what the chairman has, announced publicly, this is no CFPB that's going to shut down and turn out the lights. This is vigorous enforcement of the law is our focus, he claims. But he also says that the FTC is the cop on the beat, and that they don't make the rules. So he said that specifically. So I don't know that we're going to be having a lot of rulemaking under the Trump FTC. Now there is a petition that was recently filed where the FTC has for comment with regards to the click to cancel,
Which we thought was gone.
Which we thought was
gone, and it is back.
Yeah. So that is open for commentary until January 3rd, and it's kind of unclear whether the FTC supports that or not. If you read the chairman's dissent, there was he wasn't wholly opposed to it. He definitely felt that it was an issue that consumers were having, and that there needed to be correction, but that the rule that was eventually adopted just went way too far.
Yeah.
So we may be seeing a shortened version of that. So we'll see the rulemaking play out on that. And they pretty much want people to focus on what the law says. There are some guides that they issue and that type of thing. But they want to be black and white about it as much as possible. A little difficult with a subjective law like unfair and deceptive. But we'll see how that plays out.
Yeah, it's such an interesting rule. So that's the FTC's negative option rule that they're looking at. And I mean, I know all of us out there on the one side say we have these subscriptions that we signed up 4 years ago. We don't even remember we have it. We probably don't notice that couple dollars on our credit card. And that's what the FTC is really focusing on here. It needs to be at least as easy is what this new rule would say. And you need to be able to use the same medium for opting out of or canceling a subscription as you use to sign up for a subscription. And we all know how easy it is, especially online with our phones now, to sign up for those types of things. Where this becomes very problematic is in areas where maybe there needs to be a discussion with the consumer before they cancel.
There are consequences.
Yeah, there are consequences. And especially, if it's a utility or an emergency service or canceling a life insurance policy or other things like that, where it may not just be so easy as you should let the consumer go online and click to cancel. Now, other things like subscriptions to, I don't know, home delivery food. That's something you don't be familiar with. Maybe those things should be that easy. But it really puts a very potentially difficult obstacle in businesses' path that they have to be able to honor those under the same method that they were used. So there needs to be, I think, a little bit more work done on this. It looks like the FTC is. Do you predict that they will pass the negative option rule?
I'm smelling that they're going to have a very, very cut down version of it. Yes, yes,
yeah,
and then that way they could, because it's Republican administrations tend to pick very popular consumer protection issues. Heaven knows we all lived through Do Not Call, right, all back in the day, and it's kind of like that they throw it under the bus. Yeah, and they throw it under the bus. And the hard to cancel. I mean, they brought 4 cases this year already on that topic. They're not happy with how it's being done for some portion of it. And when the comments come in, I'm sure everybody on both sides is going to tell them how to really write the rule. I know some of our clients are, and then they'll just come at it. I think with a get that eraser out and just really put in just very clear cut standards, and that's my prediction. So
no, I think you're right. I guess we had hoped that it would be dropped and that the current standard, which is a reasonable means, would still apply and that sort of thing. obviously will advocate on behalf of clients. Let's see what else I have next.
Well, I get more on the FTC.
Oh, do you? Well,
I do.
Well, let's do it. Yes.
Really, the number one thing that the FTC has spent time on is healthcare related cases. In the privacy area, in the pricing area, in the calling area. They brought 7 cases, and there have been comments throughout the testimony that's been given by the different commissioners and the like. So we're definitely going to see that. Job scams, as they call them. A lot going to be going on with the covenants not to compete. And even this administration wants to look at everything case by case. Typically you and I are used to going in there and a swath of an industry at a time will just come under attack, right? And everybody's guilty before they even walk in the door and show you the evidence. And they want to focus on just the opposite. They want to be doing thorough investigations and identifying whether there are actual violations of the law as written.
Crazy.
I know.
I think it's because they might be a little short-staffed. They've got to be very particular about their enforcement.
And it's going to get worse. They want to be down to the level of 10 years ago. They're about halfway there. It's going to be slow though. The rest of it's going to be attrition through early retirement, that type of thing. But they've also cut their budgets 5% on outside contractors who would do a lot of the research and the background work as well. And you have to remember, like that AI order, and then there was another one too about the cutting down the regulations in government overall. They require a huge amount of work by the FTC to be able to create these task force to be able to get that work done within the time required. We're also seeing just kind of usual UDAP kind of cases, maybe about a dozen of those, a fair amount focused on those that are offering tax relief and student loan relief. We're also seeing a lot of different laws being used, ROSCA, the Online Responsibility Act, COPPA, we talked about, CAN spam, the Informed Consumers Act. And they're not shy about going after really big companies. There's settlements this year with Walmart, Visa, Match.com, Disney, Amazon, H&R Block, GM, Uber, Ticketmaster. So they're not shy on who comes within their crosshairs. It's just going to be very tightly focused. And the good news I hear from all of this, is, get your ducks in a row in your business. Make sure you know what your laws are that apply to your industry. Make sure you've got the policies and procedures and the documents so that if they do come your way, now you've got maybe a regulator that'll listen and you can prove your case that you are doing it correctly. But if you don't have that paperwork done and know what needs to be kept and how to have that arranged, then you're going to be susceptible, I think, to do investigations.
Yeah. I mean, we could both vouch for the fact, both having been on the regulator side and then representing clients in front of regulators, being able to respond to them with written policies and procedures that you have trained your employees on and you audit against makes all the difference in the world. They're willing to let something slide if it's a minor unintentional, something that may have originally appeared to be either something that permeates through the company because of consumer complaint that they've received or something like that. So you really can't overstate that enough. Are we done with the FTC?
We are done with the FTC.
Well, let's get into the FCC. I mean, the CCPA has just been so busy with rulemaking. I think they currently have, 2 or 3 that are out. The big one that we have been looking at with the Delete Act that you had mentioned earlier is this revocation of consent, or the revoke all rule. And so the FCC was originally going to make that revoke all portion of the rule revision take effect this year. And what that revoke all means is that if a person revokes consent during a telephone call or in whatever way for one method of communication, it applies to all methods of communication and all methods of communication that require either the same amount of consent or on the same subject matter as what they're revoking for. So, this becomes very complicated because it also applies across the entity. And so entities that have a lot of affiliates or a lot of subdivisions within their business have really been struggling with this concept of how do we implement this complex rule. And it is complex when you try to break it down to the individual types of things you could be communicating to people for, and using various types of technology from pre-recorded messages to I don't think there are any ATDSs anymore, but that's a conversation we can have on another day. But that and using AI, artificial voice, those types of things. So what we have seen is that the FCC has said that this isn't going to take effect in April of 2026 like it was originally set to. So they are looking at that. And they are accepting comments for that currently. I think that'll probably continue to get pushed. I don't think that's something we're going to see just because of the huge outcry from industry, but it's something that you need to be prepared for. And also, the FCC is accepting comments on that specific portion of the rule and a number of other ones too. And I believe the time to file those expires end of January, beginning of February. I should have known that for this. But, that is something that is open for comment right now, and I really encourage you to file a comment if that's something that will affect you. The other thing that we're seeing with the TCPA is that the courts are really moving in some different directions around some specific issues. I think that we had all taken it for granted for a long time that a text is a call, and that was because of some of the FTC's interpretations. But now we see district courts that are saying, wait a minute, not quite so fast. The FCC doesn't have the same authority to declare something through their regulations, and the district courts having to defer to that. So it's really changed the whole landscape as a result of, you'll notice, the McLaughlin decision. So, now we're going back and we're looking at things like, well, is a text a call? The call regulations don't neatly fit within a texting platform. So I think, going into 2026, it's probably smartest to treat it that way because we do have a split in district courts. And so what that means for anybody that decides they're not going to treat a text like a call is you're likely going to end up in litigation, and that's going to be protracted while the courts figure it out. Also, e-sign. You recall when we were implementing the one-to-one consent rules at the beginning of this year, end of last year, really, that the e-sign requirements for prior express written consent, because it's required to be consent given to the consumer that is signed by them. And so the FCC really emphasized the fact that that means you have to meet e-sign requirements. And that really does go back to some of the initial regulations with the TCPA. But we are having courts that are maybe leaning in a different direction, saying that that's not the strict application of e-sign doesn't really fit neatly with a lot of the consent collection type of things. Having said that, there are things that you can do. We work with clients to get e-sign disclosures within their consent language, so that there is that colorable argument that we're meeting the e-sign requirements. And there are some ordering of the way that you can get consumers to consent to that you need to pay attention to. But I think this will be a big issue running into 2026 as plaintiffs' attorneys fight it.
I predict that it's going to be even broader because we're hearing and seeing so many complaints with regards to consumers signing contracts on their phone for whether they're at a store to sign up for financing or whether it's door to door, and the ability to make those disclosures and to follow all of the e-sign requirements. I mean, again, e-sign was a law that was written not contemplating the technology that's available today. And as a result, it makes it almost impossible to really fully comply with that law. I mean, I think there's a lot out there, and certainly the companies that provide e-sign services, they've tried to cover themselves as much as possible. But by this litigation that Michelle's referencing, it's clearly leaving enough of an opening there for the courts to look at it both ways. So I think I see it expanding to include consumer contracts too. And I think we might start seeing even states legislate that. As well as they get more of these consumer complaints in. And typically, you get a bad actor in a state, and then all of a sudden you get a couple hundred complaints in about a couple different companies, and that's when the attorney general walks across the street and wants to and then the law, so. I don't know if we'll get that far, but I definitely think that we will see those types of contracts being drawn into the e-sign debate.
Yeah, no, I agree. Kind of moving over to the states now, what we've seen, and I would say this falls within the TCPA too, we've seen a big uptick in what we would call quiet hour solicitations, telephone calls, text messages being sent. And what that means is, in the federal level, you can place telemarketing calls between 8 a.m. and 9 p.m. And on the state level, the states are really kind of all over the place. Probably about half of them mirror the TCPA and the telemarketing sales rule to the FTC's version of the 8 a.m. to 9 p.m. and allowed on weekends as well. But there are a number of states that don't allow telemarketing after 6 o'clock. A lot of them are 9 o'clock a.m. to 8 o'clock p.m. And so the point of this is you really just need to make sure that your dialers, your texting platforms are set to comply with these more restrictive state requirements. It's an easy one from the perspective of getting those programmed correctly. And then the question I always get is, Michele, do I go by area code or address? And the answer is yes. It's the more restrictive of the two. If you have area code and address, then go by the more restrictive. There are some states that are amending their telemarketing laws to clarify that you can rely on area code for purpose of determining the location of the called party. So that would be a nice trend to see going into 2026. I don't think it'll happen much, but we have seen a few states do that this year.
Cancellation question there about cancellation method changes going forward or will be retroactive. And generally, you can't make those types of things retroactive, so it would be going forward.
Yeah, that's a revision to the actual rule, so that would be going forward. Let's see.
You're talking about the Senate Bill 37 in California. Is that a?
So I wish I was up on all of those. I believe, and Mark, you can reach out to me separately. But I believe what he's asking about are the attorney solicitation rules in California. I'm pretty sure that's what Senate Bill 37 does. It modifies those. And for us attorneys, and not necessarily us, more on the plaintiff side is where we see this personal injury, those types of things. The lead generation process is heavily regulated in some of the states. And so I will tell you that one of the attorneys in our office, Chris Wager, is just a genius when it comes to this. He works with a lot of law firms and the marketing folks they work with to make sure that they comply with these types of things. And so I don't know the specifics of Senate Bill 37, Mark, but feel free to reach out to me and you and I can talk about that. Let's see. Texas. That's probably one to talk about. Texas has revised their telemarketing regulations, and I can guarantee you that we are going to see a big uptick in private litigation. So a lot of plaintiffs' attorneys out there capitalizing on Texas because the fine is $5,000 per violation and includes for registration. So if you are a company out there making telephone calls into Texas, make sure you have reviewed those requirements for the Texas's new registration requirements, because it's $5,000 per violation, and it comes with a private right of action, which is uncommon in states for telemarketing registration, and there aren't a lot of exemptions around that. Calling with consent is one of those. There's some discussion about whether it applies to current clients, and so definitely something you want to take a look at. Can spam. We were talking before about preemption of federal rules. And so the Can Spam Act in theory preempts state regulations. And that's because when the FTC passed the Can Spam Act, they wanted to make sure that the state regulations, kind of what's happening now with AI, didn't get in the way of the federal government being able to enforce, or at least set a limit that made sense that the texting technology would take off. But in California and Nevada are two states that I would point out specifically. What the Can Spam Act doesn't preempt is the state's consumer protection, so unfair and deceptive acts and practices types of regulations. And
that's where we see most of the enforcement actions, when those subject lines really don't give an indication that there's a solicitation in there, rather they're coming at it from a different direction.
Yeah. And especially in California and Nevada, where there's a private right of action, and the Carper Balsam, two attorneys that are really filing a lot of litigation in those areas. The Pacific Law Group is another one of those. And so, pay attention to who's sending emails on your behalf and the emails that you're sending. Make sure that those subject lines aren't misleading as to what's happening in that email, if it's free and that's not the case, or if it's advertising services that aren't accurate.
It's not a clear-cut defense that your vendor did it when, you signed a contract that said the vendor would comply with all the laws. But if you didn't take some effort to make sure to vet that, then you very well could get drug into that litigation as well.
Yeah, yeah, and obviously the deeper the pockets,
Yeah.
the bigger the target. So we will continue to see those types of things heading into 2026. The other thing that I have on my list is that with some of the other state kind of telemarketing laws, we have the anti-robocall task force, and Ohio is one of the states that really takes a lead in that. And Helen, I think you hired half the people that are on that task force.
I did. That was 25 years ago, but they're
still
still at
there.
it. Yeah.
They're still there. So yeah, the states that have really taken the lead on this are Ohio, North Carolina, Indiana, Pennsylvania, and I'm forgetting the other one that's out there. But some conversations I've had with the FCC over the last couple of weeks, they've even talked about how aggressive the anti-robocall task force has gotten with the lawsuits that it's initiating.
Yeah.
And I can tell you, having represented a number of companies in front of that group, it's not a lot of fun to have 5 different state AGs on the one call grilling you with questions. But if you take the advice that Helen had earlier about having the policies and procedures, and then really making sure that you're abiding by those, it makes those telephone conversations much easier. But I have no doubt that we're going to see an uptick in that. The states have been emboldened by litigation against a company called Avid. The lawyers were putting up a big fight that the state AGs do not have the ability to regulate interstate commerce. Go back to our initial conversation, and specifically that the FCC is the agency with exclusive authority over telecommunications. So those arguments have not been completely successful, and so I am convinced that the robocall mitigation task force will be moving forward now with that.
Yeah, and I think that especially the states that you mentioned, the cases that the investigations they're opening into companies, the cases they are bringing themselves in court, they're just not letting people off. They are just, I mean, if you can get a couple of $100,000 settlement out of them, you're lucky. It's more likely to be a 7-figure one. And they're not going to care about whether you had policies and procedures in place. It's been very much of a kind of a brick wall on some of those cases. So you really need to have that buttoned down and making sure that everything you can do to prevent those problems from happening, you are doing.
Any other predictions?
I'm kind of sitting here. Yeah, well, I think really everything that you're seeing with regards to what the Trump FTC, and that's what I work with mostly. I mean, you do it mostly FCC. All of what is not being done is going to be done by the states. Okay, they're going to the blue states are just going to slide right in there. I know I was getting another presentation on the antitrust elements of it, and they were saying the exact same thing. We're already seeing the states gearing up to go forward in the areas that the current administration just won't do, or if there's political issues there. And so I think it's just another excuse for them to do what they love to do. Get in there and do it. So that's where that's where I'm going to be very focused on this year. Next year.
Well, I'm glad you're focusing on that.
That's right.
You're a good one with the FTC.
Yeah,
for sure. Well, that's pretty much what I think we're looking at there. Let's see, we're missing anything else here. As we've mentioned with the privacy regulations that are going into effect, that is by far the most active area of state regulation. I know that a lot of you on this call work with Aaron Perry and Nick Whistler and Josh Stevens, who are like the dream team trifecta when it comes to implementing these new privacy regulations that are going into effect. But the things that I hear them speaking frequently to clients about that we're going to continue to see in 2026, I think this is going to be the area primarily of enforcement, is just making sure it starts with the simple things that your privacy policy, if you are making assertions in your privacy policy about the way that you handle data, that you are actually meeting those requirements. It always starts there at a base level.
I start at the effective date. Okay. When I get a client call, a potential new client, first thing I do, I pull up their privacy policy, their terms and conditions, effective date, 2023. Okay, I can give you a long laundry list of things that have happened since 2023.
Yeah.
You know, so that's, if you want to tighten things up, that's a really simple, easy way to do it with those two documents.
Yeah, yeah. The other area where we're seeing a lot is with cookie disclosures, and there are some states that prohibit the use of certain types of technology for gathering information through cookies and other different technology means, and requiring that consumers be able to opt out of that, and that it be an easy opt-out method for that. California will continue to be active with its enforcement in 2026. They've really kind of hit in a stride with the types of enforcement actions that they are initiating. They have a group of true believers in California that were very active in writing those laws. And so they have a strong interest in enforcing those. So especially if you are doing business in California, make sure that you're staying on top of the California regulations as they continue to evolve, and paying attention to the enforcement actions. I know that's something that our group, provides frequent updates on.
Yeah.
So, well, do we have any questions out there?
Yeah, anything else before we finish up today?
Yeah.
Doesn't look like it.
Well, I think next year we should probably look at this and see how well we did with predicting. We haven't done that. We haven't done that in the past. I think we need to do that.
Sometimes I think that the predictions don't come true because we warn everybody, they do the right thing, okay, and there's no problems.
There you go. I love that. That's a great answer. Well, then we've done our job here for today.
That's why we're.
Anyway, thanks everybody for attending today. Feel free to reach out to Helen or I with any questions. And as we said at the beginning, the recording will be available probably in about 3 days.
Thanks
Happy
so much, everyone.
holidays.
Happy holidays.